Hi, and thanks for listening to Couch Theater. Before we start the episode, I want to give you the option of checking out our Reddit page. There you can see the notes that we'll be going through the entire episode. There's 2 sections, before the movie and an after the movie spoilers section, all of which is written in colorful chalk. So if you want a little extra, go check it out and enjoy the episode. Hi, and welcome to Couch Theater. I'm Stefan, your host, and I'm joined by 2 guests this time. We have Cassi.
Hi there.
And Tyler.
Hi.
And basically what we're trying to do here is just enjoy movies. We're friends. We're here to talk about movies. We're here to have some fun.
I don't even like movies that much.
Yeah, me neither. This is dumb.
Get out of here then. God, why did I even invite her?
So this is like what? Like you listen to it in your car? How does this work?
I don't know. I haven't strategized that exact.
Oh, okay.
What is a movie?
Do I get them on my phone?
Okay,
Worst guest ever.
Oh no.
damn it.
All right. So the way this works is there are 2 parts. We're gonna talk about a movie that we're gonna watch, and then we're gonna go watch the movie, and then we're gonna come back for the second part and talk about what we watched. Wow. And you should be following that as well. So today we're gonna be talking about The Invitation, which is on Netflix, and it came out in 2015.
I'm really excited about this one.
It's a good one, I think. So it's a psychological thriller. Cassie's already seen it.
Couple
times. So have I. Tyler has not seen it.
I get to be the fresh eyes every time.
Yeah. It's nice, though, I think.
It is. I mean, honestly, I need to watch more movies. I like to sit here talking about how much I love movies, and boy, do I not watch them.
Too bad you don't know anybody that can introduce you to new movies or anything.
Yeah, I know, right? I got to start getting rid of friends and just getting new ones altogether. I'll see you guys later.
How to start off this movie. So like I said, it's a psychological thriller, which basically just means it's an emotional roller coaster inside the mind of usually one person. That's a great way to describe this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, I don't like to spoil anything. I don't like to drop too much, so I won't tell you too much about the story. But if we're going to just skip into the themes frame of mind section, which you can see on Reddit.
It is a surprisingly bare board. There is so much more black space on there than I'm used to seeing.
Yeah. There's a lot of emotion going on in the movie, which we'll talk about later, but very few themes. So, but we'll have some fun talking about this later.
I should point out that all the black space is on the top half of the board from before the movie. There is plenty written for the after the movie section.
Yeah, that's true. It's one of those things where it's like I have that first section of the board, and I keep thinking I know what that section's supposed to be, and now I don't know anymore.
And the more you write there, the more that I want to respond to it. And it's I try to tie themes together and think about other movies I've seen, and I start making wild speculations. And then suddenly I'm imagining this whole movie that's not even happening before we even watch the movie. So I
which is the exact opposite.
You're
trying to do
anti-spoiling the movie.
Yeah,
setting up a false frame of mind.
I mean, if that works for you, if it makes you enjoy the movie more, then do that.
Unraveling your nonsense that you made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Stop it. So I guess the first thing that I want to bring up, and you can see that on the board, is PTSD. And usually when I think or we talk about PTSD, you think of soldiers who have come back and they're suffering from combat situations. But PTSD is more than that, right? I would say that we all suffer from PTSD of some kind in different areas of our life. We all have traumatic events
Definitely.
that we suffer from. And so the main character definitely suffers from PTSD. It's just slowly unraveled as to what that is, what that event was.
It was a lot.
So
Awesome.
Prepare yourself for that. Just think about like, what does that mean? What does PTSD mean in a non-combat scenario?
Maybe like how it would affect you if you went through something somewhat similar, and where your mind space would be at would probably be what my thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agreed.
I'd be fine. Probably just gonna sit here and
Well, that's because you're heartless.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing, I mean, there are plenty of other movies that have done this, but the other thing I'd like to think about is unreliable narrator, which is usually in literature when you're reading. You think about a character who is telling the story from a first person, but what they are seeing, what he or she is seeing or saying is you can't rely on their testimony. You can't believe everything that they say because their view is skewed. It's not this God narrator. So we definitely get that a lot in this movie, but it's not Shutter Island.
It's not.
If you've seen that movie.
I was not stoked on that movie, so, hey, plus points.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that. So.
Yeah.
It's less of a delusion in the sense of what am I seeing? Is it real? It's more of an emotional delusion, which I think is much more prevalent in society. And how does that influence how we act and how we see things emotionally? Like just an emotional influence, and how does that change everything around us?
You could spend years of your life operating in one emotional headspace, and then one tiny thing can flip everything, and then suddenly your whole world is different.
Exactly.
PTSD.
Exactly. What? They're tied together?
No.
Wait, is that why you wrote that on the board?
Shut up. I know, I should have drawn arrows, Boing, boing.
Arrows would be way helpful. I mean, sure, you already have like 6 colors of writing, but
I only see like 4 arrows, and it's just clearly not enough. Fail.
2 more things. And I think I should touch on this before I go any further, just because it's in my mind. All of these things, it's not something that we should like remember everything that we say right now. It's just we're getting into the feeling of what the movie's going to be like. And it's not necessary to remember everything. You're just going to experience it. And I think this is just like a nice prep for
Trying
that.
to make sure we're like in the right headspace and that we're not expecting things that might not happen. And
is that a thing people do?
it's been really nice because it's definitely helped me. I've been in I've watched a lot of movies with you, and you've always like kind of prepped me for them and like got me in a really good headspace, which some of the movies I definitely would not have tried or like paid attention to, but then like you get me in a different headspace when I watch them, and it's been super helpful to open me up to different movies. And so I think that this is pretty cool.
Well, thanks for that.
Shut up.
Oh, that's so nice.
Your entire neck just disappears when you're praying on stage.
I turn into a turtle.
That's a long neck.
That's a lot of neck to disappear. I mean, how does he do it?
Where does it go?
Okay, so the next bit to talk about is like social norms and social anxieties and rules that we follow while we're speaking in groups or just one-on-one. So I think there are a lot of things that we kind of overlook when we're in a group. Like if someone is acting like really awkward or strange, most of the time nobody will acknowledge it. What do we avoid? What do we ignore? What do we choose to ignore? Or what do we not speak about? Because we're like afraid of offending the group or...
Also with that though, I think that it's kind of neat to think about like the closeness of the group before the traumatic event happened and how close and comfortable they were with each other and like maybe struggling to strive to get back into that space together.
I think this is a movie of like bonds.
Yeah.
Not only between friends, but of family. And there's a lot of implied emotions and meanings that are never explicitly stated. And that's most of the really juicy parts of this movie are just implied emotions.
Yeah, and like the interpersonal relationships and how everybody reacts to each other.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Something to think about is mercy. What do you guys think mercy means?
My Overwatch main.
Nerd. So for me, like, mercy is definitely like some sort of forgiveness, but it's on kind of a different type of forgiveness where they're kind of forgiving you, but not. It still might be something that they haven't fully gotten over, that they truly forgive you for, but there's really no reason. And they're just like, okay, well, let me make you feel better by making you feel like you're forgiven. And that's more mercy to me.
Okay.
Like kind of pity forgiveness, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that encompasses it pretty well. I mean, it's a little more specific, and maybe that's from the perspective of somebody who's actually seen the movie, because mercy also, like, it's not necessarily just, I mean, you put the word, how does it differ from forgiveness, I guess, is it can be really far away from forgiveness, because it almost implies apathy to me, where it's like, not so much that I have strong negative feelings towards you, it's that I don't have strong feelings at all, and your fate, I guess I can let you have the kind of fate that you would prefer, because it doesn't make as strong of an impact on my life.
And I think you struck on something important there. I'm going to let you have something. I think forgiveness is like a personal thing, and mercy is like, there's definitely another party involved, and your actions affect that, and it's not up to them.
I think that's a really solid way to follow up what we each just said. The fact that it involves two people, I think that is important.
I mean, of course, forgiveness involves, I mean, you can forgive yourself, so that's one person, but, forgiveness does usually involve two people.
Well, you said forgiveness is more for yourself, or mercy can kind of be for the other person, but it's also kind of for you depending on the context. I don't know. Again, so it's a very broad concept, and I haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah. So, so something to think about.
Yeah. He asked about the term.
That's right. Somebody's listening. Okay, you bumped out your +1. You're not the worst guest.
Yes. Thanks for your mercy.
Perfect. And otherwise, at this point, I think we're going to watch the movie.
Woohoo!
And you should too. So at this point, you should be pausing and going onto Netflix and watching The Invitation. And then come back after and we'll talk. So we're back. That was a movie, yeah.
It's one of those. That's a thing.
It's a serious roller coaster, that movie.
It is. So good, though.
Yeah, and I hope I swayed you a little bit. I feel like it can be like a little bit predictable as far as them being in a cult, and it's like, things are going to get bad quick. But I think if you see it in the eyes of Will, and that Will is like unstable, it makes it a much more interesting movie.
It definitely does. And I don't think that necessarily you're the one that's swaying it, like, oh yeah, like this is obviously a cult movie. It is called The Invitation.
Yeah, that's true.
They say the word cult like 10 minutes into the
Yeah.
movie.
So, and I guess just to talk about cults real quick, let's see, I wrote that. Yeah, Heaven's Gate was a really big one, and there's a lot of similarities between Heaven's Gate and this particular cult, The Invitation. And in fact, like when they did do their mass suicide, they went out by taking like a barbiturate, like phenobarbital, and just like going to sleep. Except I think they tied like plastic bags over their heads too.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember because there's been a couple of cult mass suicides, and I don't want to conflate my facts before just spouting things out there.
Well, they said Manson like early on in the movie.
Yeah.
Mansonites?
The Freemasons.
Didn't you look? They said something called Est too.
I think that one's like The Secret, where it's like it's just a harmless like self-help thing.
I feel like you can be seduced by what they're saying a little bit. We're talking about pain and things that hold us back, and especially now, like in the time we live in, there's all sorts of self-help going on, and what they're selling is in demand.
Yeah, definitely.
See, I really like the way that you structure these conversations, because the first thing I'm thinking about when we stop is watching a movie is typically very different from you, and like I'm jumping the gun. So I like starting here, because what I was really keyed into was mostly the differences between Will and the other friends. Like, very clearly, the other people are in a cult. Those four are absolutely bad. The movie tells you, and it's like, okay, cool, you get to know they're crazy. But then you're kind of following the perspective of Will, while at the same time really getting yourself keyed into his normal friends, because they're just normal. They're like, hey, yeah, these guys are weird, but I mean, like, whatever, people are weird. Let's hang out and have a dinner party.
Yeah. Well, they're all from LA, and they make it very clear, like, you know, there are all sorts of people in LA.
It's LA, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, his friends seem like really down to earth and cool, and the fact that they're willing to have this night, this evening with these clearly cult members, and they're not sure if they want to call it a cult or not. But, you know, this group of people that they believe something a little bit off. They've been in Mexico, and they're willing to just go with it.
They're just being like super supportive friends. It's obnoxious. It's lovely.
And I love how like the movie's super tongue-in-cheek about it. Like the very first frame of that little introductory video is already hilarious. It's the sun rising over a mountain to lens flare going across. Like it's just
welcome to our home.
It was so stupidly perfect.
And then, of course, you know, it begins on the sunrise and then ends with the moon, you know, at night. That's beautiful. But so that's one of the topics that we brought up in the beginning. I mean, there's a lot of social anxiety going on, especially from Will's part, and yet the group as a whole is containing it. As a group, we're kind of like making it known that this is weird, but we're not like calling your bluff or anything. We're just going to stick around and see what happens, because that's the social nice thing to do. And obviously that was the wrong thing to do in this situation when there were so many red flags.
Yeah, it calls it out like verbatim, like, oh, there's something dangerous and awful going on here, and you guys are ignoring it because he brought out some nice wine.
Yeah. Well, the way he articulates himself is like perfect. They could have made him like a little bit more crazy, but I don't know. I like the way that they did it. I mean, I think, like you said, at the very end of the movie, like when it became very clear where things were going, like they were all going, this was like a mass suicide death cult. You almost wish that Will was wrong and maybe he did something to instigate things.
I kind of like that they didn't make him like, I like that he wasn't that crazy, like how it was just like a little splash, like a spice of crazy. Just because it adds to it. It adds to the narrative. It adds to everything where you're like, okay, like I see where he's coming from. Like he's being a little extreme, but like I totally see where he's coming from. And so I like how they did that. It was like a nice little misdirection, even though like you kind of knew what was going on, but it was like a really nice misdirection.
Yeah, and like that's actually kind of where I want to listen to the both of you talk for a little bit, because I have very complicated feelings about the way this movie handled PTSD in general, and then I kind of feel like the third act abandons those ideas, and I don't want to sit here and ramble about that when you two have both seen this more than I have and probably have more developed opinions on it. So I kind of want to just listen for a bit to that and interject.
Sure.
I feel like I have something valuable to say.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me right now.
Pressure.
I don't know, man. Just talk about the movie and the things you liked about it.
Well, off of what Cassie just said, I think, like all movies, you know, we're in the protagonist's shoes. That's the goal of the movie, right? And we want to associate with them. But at the same time, a good movie will make you feel awkward about what the protagonist is doing. And so even though we know something is wrong with him and he's acting crazy, every time people say, you're acting crazy, you feel like you're personally being attacked. Like, he's not being crazy. Like, something's wrong.
Well, and then, like, I kind of was thinking about, this time around, I didn't think about it the first two. I think we were talking about, like, social norms and, like, how you react to different social situations and PTSD and things like that. they're acting crazy. Like the Eden and the husband and their friends, they're obviously acting crazy, but they're doing it in a polite way.
Yeah, David's the
not
old
Ryan. Yeah, and then
record
Will,
producer who did coke.
Yeah, and then Will, he is saying things that seem slightly based in logic, but in a way that's very abrupt, and everybody's like, "Oh wait, no, this is not the correct way to do it," which is. He's in this home where he lost something, like he lost his child, and like that's really hard. And yet he's the one that's out of norm here because he's like, something's clearly weird and I'm not okay with it. And they're acting weird but polite, so nobody's saying anything about it. It's just a trip.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that this movie like wakes you up to really quickly is paying attention to social cues. There's a lot of like weird dominance baiting going around back and forth in the first couple of scenes where they have this stuff going on. I mean, David comes out strong, like, oh, yeah, it's my house. And there's a moment where I feel like Will first has his like real first step away from being like totally chill. Like, obviously disturbed. Everyone's like, Will's having a hard time with this. But the first time he like demonstrate just a little bit of hostility is when they're sitting down to watch the movie. And he, I forget exactly what he says, but the way he emphatically says David, like, puts a little bit of the chill over the room, and it was like that was like awkward. Where it was just like, ooh, way to be a weird guy. But then I actually really loved. This is the first time where I was like, Kira is awesome. She is such a nice character.
Well, she supported him. He was like,
down.
why would you show us that? And Kira goes like he says, David, why would you show us that? And Kira goes, yeah, David, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit weird, don't you think, David?
Yeah,
He's the best.
He goes out on a limb to like bring up a thing that's kind of weird in a situation where everybody
Best
was just
supportive girlfriend ever.
She's just a badass chick. Thank you.
It's really difficult for me to think of women as anything but accessories, so we're going to have to change the way we're talking right now.
Woof.
Whoa, dude. Yeah, it's really cool. Like, it's a really neat dynamic that they have. And I liked Will's character a lot.
Well, I think we can, if we're going to finish out exploring this, I think there's the question of, all the friends are casually ignoring or choosing to ignore or go along with all of the crazy stuff that's happening, and Will is the only one who's not. And so I guess what they're trying to say is that because of all of the emotion he's been through, it's like all of those layers, all of the defense mechanisms that we've built up that we use to interact with each other calmly and collectively, they're gone. Like, he doesn't have them anymore because of this great loss that he's had. And of course, like, this is how he acts. And then you have the cult members who are like pretending that everything's cool, but really it's not. So they're wearing this other mask, I guess. I mean, Will has no mask.
He just has a beard.
Yeah, he just has a... Yeah, right. He lost his son and he grew a beard and his hair out.
Oh, and boy, does he need that beard. Those flashbacks.
I mean, you're right. Yeah.
So can I bring up something that I noticed on this round that I never noticed before? Do you think Eden was hesitant? I don't know. Hesitant isn't the correct word. I don't think Eden wanted to do it. She had a lot of doubts about it. And so there was that moment that she asked Will to go out and get the firewood. She's like, oh, you know where the firewood is. You know where we keep it. And in that moment, she knows that he can see her room, her very open room with a big open window. Yeah. And she decides to put the medication away at that exact moment, knowing that he's in that area. And there were multiple times where she did little things like that, where it's like she would know that he would see these things. And it's like she was trying to put him at some sort of tension or trying to, create some sort of doubt in his mind.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think Eden's character, and they even show in the past, like, she makes several attempts, cries for help. Like, she tries to commit suicide right after their son dies, which is seen as a cry for help. And I think the medicine is a great example. And yeah, she's very apprehensive, I think, about the whole thing.
Thanks for using the word for me.
Like, lots of reservations about the whole thing. And I think that the way that she acts really exemplifies that. Like when Ben, who's the large guy who left his wife at home with the kids, like calls her out in like the very beginning, like, you know, Eden, this is kind of weird. And she just like straight up slaps him in the face and calls him like a loser. Like, what exactly did she say?
Nobody cares what you think.
That's why nobody cares.
But no, I'm
what you
sorry.
think.
That was too catty. She doesn't say it like that. She says it more matter of factly. Like, that's why nobody cares what you think.
Yeah. No, she said like seriously. But I mean, I think that reaction, I mean, obviously was way over the top. And I think she's trying to, like, I think you're right. I think she's trying to drop hints the whole time that something is wrong. She doesn't feel right about this. And yet she's going along because she's been told to. She's been brainwashed.
Yeah, she's been manipulated. And I mean, just like all cults, and like her very, like, the moment where she needs people to not manipulate her, she was manipulated into this. And it's just insane.
Oh, that's where cults step in.
Dicks.
I know.
So my favorite thing about this movie, honestly, is how good it was like at intentionally taking you places. It really, really purposefully like left a lot to the imagination. Like there were some things, like we talked about how they showed how she tried to commit suicide, but like they didn't really show her try to commit suicide. And like the camera referenced down at her wrist where she had like a bracelet or something on, but like it didn't do a thing that a lot of movies would do, where it would actually spend more camera time on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it seemed like, I mean, I don't know if this was a director choice or a cinematography choice, but they did that constantly throughout the movie. And I think another good example, but doesn't really add like a whole lot, would be when the birthday cake comes out, and instead of like showing him blow out the candles, they show Will's face just go dark after the candles go out. I love that moment. But there are so many moments like that where they're hardly showing anything. They don't show the kid getting hit in the head with a bat. Yeah. Not that anybody wants to see that, but I mean, we know what happened. That's what stories and like metaphors specifically are really good at. Like instead of showing you something or making an argument, you instead make your audience, the people that are receiving the argument, make the argument for you themselves. They fill in the blanks. And then you don't have to say anything because they've done it themselves.
Yeah,
it's so much more powerful that way too. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're totally good. That's why you edit the podcast.
I wear the pants in this podcast.
Wait, you guys are wearing pants?
No, I'm not actually. It's really just Stefan. He told us we're not allowed to.
I mean, clearly my pants are the best pants.
I mean, yeah, they're like maroon.
Jeans. So dumb.
Dumbasses.
No, the most aggressive moment of that kind of thing was when what's her? She disappears so quickly in the movie. The one who looks like Pam.
Like an old Pam.
Yeah. She specifically, you're watching over Will's shoulder to see if she's okay. And the last time you see her the very tail end of her car sticking out behind the thing. The camera ever so slightly abandons that to the point where it's just an inch below your frame of reference, and then David's like, "Come away from the window," and you're like, "No, don't go away, no," and then you never get that inch back, and so it's like you're left wondering, you know, did Pruitt do something like creepy out there, or did he genuinely just try to coax her back into the murder party?
I mean, after that god awful story, god awful's not the right word. Terrifying, bone-chilling story about how he murdered his wife.
Jeez.
We're all on edge at that point, and not being able to see her actually go and actually seeing Pruitt like leave camera with her is scary.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess she's okay. Who knows? Maybe
she wound up at another one of those parties, because there were a bunch of them.
There were a lot.
It was a little creepy. Like, when he lit the lantern, whenever somebody lights a lantern outside and looks longingly across the distance, I'm immediately going to think about The Great Gatsby, which made the ending super dark.
Was Was that like the blue light or the green light?
It was a green light, yeah.
Right.
It doesn't actually share any thematic similarities. That's just a funny little moment that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
Made the movie darker.
Yes. We talked about PTSD, and I think maybe it'd be interesting to compare and contrast Will's way of dealing with his son's death with Eden's, considering they both share this incredibly traumatic event that they're both dealing with in very different ways. I mean, Will has decided to, he bears it like every day, like clearly you can see it on his face. He grew a beard. God, just to protect yourself, from the elements.
The beard is his new
this
son.
cold world. But
I know my beard comes in handy quite often.
You wish. But I feel like he pushes it down a little bit too. I also think, to go back to what we were talking about before, how they're slowly bringing stuff up throughout the entire movie. The director, the cinematographer, not just the way they bring it up, but how they bring it up, these memories that sort of bubble to the surface as he's walking around his house and remembering things. And I know that's something that they do in all movies where they're slowly revealing things from the past or things that have happened. But I think they do it really, really well, and they capture what Will is going through at that moment. Like, he's obviously not trying to think of those things at all times, but when they bubble to the surface, you can see, like, he's, like, losing it. He's trying to keep it inside, and it's not working.
But they're all, like, really beautiful moments, too, and really sweet, simple moments. It made me think of Westworld Reveries.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's, like, a memory that's also, like, present. And so there was that moment where he was laying in bed with his son, and he was modern day Will. He had that massive beard, he had the long flowy locks, but his son was still timeless and at that age. And it was really, really beautiful.
I almost wish we'd done Wind River already,
Oh.
So we can make references to Wind River?
So I could make references to Wind River, but I will anyway. So there's a moment in Wind River where they're talking about, losing a loved one, and how instead of holding back that pain, you should embrace all of that pain, because otherwise you will murder every memory that you ever had with that person, every good memory.
Or your dinner guests.
There you go. See, instead of holding, it's like they don't even hold it inside is the weird thing. It's like they just reject it. Mm-hmm. Like, nope, don't have that thought. And so the immediate response is obviously kill everyone I know.
What other options do we have?
Oh, there is a third option, though. It's kind of what bugs me about movies that like want to be sort of more genre. This. I feel like I know the turn is great. It's very well executed. It feels really good to watch. But I was so invested in the idea that not that Will was right or that Eden was right. I thought they were both wrong. I was very much on the side of like neither one of you is moving on. Like clearly Will's perspective is screwed up. I thoroughly wanted him to be just wrong, and they're just in a weird cult where they're not doing anything harmful, but they're also not doing anything productive. I wanted his friends to be right. I wanted it to just be like the only way to move on is to chew through those feelings and deal with them and move on and enjoy life. That's his perspective. You spend so much time with all these warped like time skips. Like there are times when he's in one place, then he's in another place, and there's no real transition to it. It's like he basically spends the whole party outside or looking morosely at a table or something like that while everybody else is having a good time. And like I really wanted the movie to settle in on like, no, dude, Will, you have to resolve your shit. And so I feel a little betrayed when like he's kind of right about the danger part of it, and then the movie like then takes that and is like, I don't know. I feel like this is where, or like I kind of want you guys to talk, because I really feel abandoned by the third act of this movie.
Well, okay, so I agree with you in some respects. Like clearly, the way that Will is dealing with things doesn't feel right, because I mean he's still in a lot of pain, but it has only been a couple of years, and then his wife disappeared for those years, like completely went off the map, left the country. And I think going back to why he sees things, it's just, I feel like it's because he's so raw and he doesn't have any mechanism to digest all of these weird vibes that he's getting from this place. How he's dealing with things, the only way to reconcile that, I think, is he's got Kira by his side, who is the stone, the rock on which he's standing on, keeping above water. I mean, Kira says it like outside when he's just like, well, that's what letting go looks like. They're letting go and they think everything's cool and it's not. Mm-hmm. They're holding everything in, rejecting things, and it's making them lunatics. And Kira immediately responds back like, I'm not telling you to like just let things go. It's just you got to start living again. These are your friends. You love them. You've been ignoring them, and you need that. That's why this feels so weird. Yeah. Of course, she's wrong in a way. But right.
I want to come to Will's defense here. So obviously he's still holding it with him. It's been 2 years. He has some sort of functionality because he's in this like really awesome relationship. And
you just love Kira.
She's so good. But okay, so he's in the house for the first time in a long time, in 2 years. He's in the house that he lost his son in, that he lived with his son. And so he lived with his son and his wife, and he had this perfect life that he was going to live, and that was supposed to be his forever. And this is the first time he's back in it. So it's going to be raw. He's going to have these memories come back to the surface because he hasn't been able to have them. Not that real, at least. So you guys are being really hard on him.
No. I totally agree with that. I know. I
was trying to be the middle path.
No, you never. Jerks. You never get to see Will outside of that frame of mind because the entirety of the movie takes place in this night. So from the time the movie starts, the time the movie ends, he's aware of just the invitation, of the fact he's going to go see his wife in his house, and it's like that's a super weird headspace to be in. He could be a totally different, awesome dude any other night.
He is. Have you met his girlfriend?
Oh, it's like an invitation to torture and pain.
Yeah, and it's like he's with these people that obviously care and love about him, but he also went through something that they don't know how to be supportive for, because who would know how to be supportive during this situation?
Right. And well, you see it in all of their eyes. Every time they look at him, they're just like,
Yeah, and then Gina just had that really lovely moment where she was trying to explain to him, and he was, being worried that people were trying to kill him, and so he didn't hear any of it. But she had this like really lovely moment where she was like trying to say, hey, like, I'm sorry I've been absent, I thought it's what you needed, I don't think it is. And but even being with them is probably hard, because like I know with my friends who have kids, like I am a part of their children's lives, and so if like I don't know, like probably being around all these people that cared for his son in the way that they did is also really hard, you know? And it's the first time he's seen them in a long time.
Yeah. No, I imagine it's very hard for them too. Yeah. To touch on something that you said before, I love the way that you worded it, was like Will coming back to this house, this paradise. I don't know exactly how. I haven't crystallized the idea, and I tried to spend a little bit of time on it. I just couldn't quite get it. But there's definitely some like biblical references going on in this movie.
So many. You and I are not the right people to go on that one.
I know. Okay,
that's where Tyler comes in.
Hi. Nothing that strong, as far as I could tell.
Eden, the Last Supper.
I know. But in terms of actually, that's the problem with biblical references. They're never relevant. They never have any kind of thematic tie-in, and maybe this one does. I've only seen it once, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen stuff, and it's like this. There's just biblical stuff in here because biblical stuff is creepy. Which that might be the answer. I don't know.
Huh? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean that's all I really have to say. I mean, her name is Eden. She wore white. But then she shoots herself in the womb, which I guess was less biblical and more just a tie to my son killed me kind of thing.
Well, now actually thinking about it more, I want to count more things, like how many times did Will storm off? Because if it was 3 times, there's one.
Is that number biblical?
I think that went over our heads.
It's Judas. 3 times he's asked to betray, and then he does finally, and that would be him when he slaps the wine out of everybody's hands. That's the time when, there it goes. Yeah, see, you know what? Religious references are usually tenuous at best. You have way cooler stuff on this board. There are other movies we've talked about watching where the religious angle is for some reason the thing everybody looks at, and I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. This stuff's more interesting.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Yeah, totally.
No, I mean...
this is it's. I feel like it's a red herring. Like they throw it in the movie just to make you think about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also you like to pick movies for this that are like that are like I almost want to call them books. You never because I love movies like this. But I feel like you would never pick like a terribly simple movie for this podcast. Like something straightforward. It would.
Well, I try not to. I mean, I think that there are plenty of movies like I'll eventually get to Mr. Brooks, which isn't a great movie, but there's so much going on that's really, really interesting that
it's great.
Makes it great.
It's also not a simple movie.
Not a simple movie. That is true. I had something and I totally lost it, but that's okay.
Last time you were talking is about biblical references. Did you?
I guess the only thing I can think is of they were living in this paradise, and then it seemed like everything was perfect, and then death comes in, and it's like knowledge destroys them, and Eden is like trying to ignore things, like pretend that things aren't real, and Will is the one who's like accepting things, like willing himself to exist.
But
wow.
I know. It's a big stretch. I don't. That's why it's not on the board, because I didn't have
because it was
much
fun.
to go on.
It's almost not a stretch though, is the thing.
I know. It's like when they were writing it, they like kind of just threw those things together. And I'm sure that if the director was here and the writer, they'd be like, "Well, this is how it ties together," and it would be like. Bouncy ball, just like.
Oh, never listen to the directors when they talk about their movies. You never want to hear Aronofsky's opinion on his movies.
That's well.
No, you're right. Though
we've had this conversation before, where it's just like you never want to hear a writer, or at least I don't think you ever want to hear a writer talk about their work, because it literally taints the purpose of the art. Like if they tell you what the movie is, then all imagination is gone. Mm-hmm. Like
it's a conversation you and I have had so many times about how it's all so subjective. Like when you read a book, it's subjective, and when you watch these movies, it's subjective, and it's all based on your own life experience and what you need to get out of it at that moment.
Yeah.
And so when you hear somebody who knows about it, or like had an idea
knows,
on it,
quote unquote,
they don't know. Anyways, it ruins the magical thing that makes it personal to you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, agreed. And I think it's like a child, and they give birth to it, and it's not theirs anymore. So they don't get to tell us what it is because it's not theirs.
You were right though about Will, because he speaks like a screenwriter. Like he's very much the writer of this movie's mouthpiece, especially because he's always pointing out like the really obvious. Like the first time this movie is like super weird for me is when the door is locked, and I was expecting honestly the movie to kind of not acknowledge it, to just let it go by and just be a thing that Will noticed, and for some reason we were just supposed to accept it as normal. I feel like a lot of people would just be fine with that, but no, Will points it out, and like everybody's kind of treating him like a jerk for it. And it's like, no, dude, he locked us in this house. Like, that's super weird. Like, you literally can't leave right now if you wanted to. Like, you have to ask him. And even if he's not going to murder me, like, no.
Can I bring up something that's probably going to get edited out, but I want to?
No, go for it, yeah.
The house. It's so disorienting.
Yes, and I love it. I love it. It's like a labyrinth.
It like stays in me every time I watch it. I try and figure this house out every single time I watch it, and it's so disorienting, but it feeds so much into the movie, especially if you think about it. Like, they're all drinking and they're all like having a good time, and then they do those things you were mentioning, how it never shows him like transition. He's like in one spot and then another, and it just adds to this disorienting mess that this house is. I love it.
I've watched it enough times that I kind of have an idea of the layout of the house.
Don't ruin it for me.
But it is, especially when they start running, from things, it gets very disorienting. And I think that's purposefully done.
And it's even they changed it because he was like, oh, remember, there was a door right here. There was a door right here. So even all these people who have been in this house countless numbers of times are still disoriented in it because they've changed it.
Well, I feel like that was almost like another whack at Will's sanity. He can't remember how things like work logically in the house. Either that or we're calling it a haunted house and it just sort of changes.
It's a confusing house.
A door would have been a weird thing to put in the room, right, where he was pointing it out, because it was like in the front of like the home theater.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It seemed like an awkward design.
Well, it looked like a door out into nowhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it went into the garage.
It's an exterior wall. But to go back to Will being like the logic center of the movie, which is hilarious because he's like kind of insane. In horror, one of the things that they like to do is pervert logic. It's funny because I feel like they make, if you're watching the movie the way that they want you to, it's like they're making the audience pervert logic in a way. Because like we're on Will's side and we're constantly like seeing these things that he's pointing out, like, why is that door being locked? Like, that could be a fire hazard. And yet the entire group is pointing out to Will how crazy that is. Like, calm down, Will. Everything's cool. Ignoring things and twisting and perverting logic to the point that it just is insane.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so effective at that point too. It's like, and I guess that's I would have wanted a totally different movie for the moment that I liked the most to be like the climax of the movie, because it really felt like it. Was,
where Will just goes crazy and starts murdering everyone.
Yeah. Where Will does that. When he's laying out all of his cards, he's going like straight up like, I have a message here. And where I thought the movie was going to go was that maybe the message wasn't real. So that would have been a far more like psychologically like this dude's got something wrong with him. But instead it was a much more visceral like, oh, it hurt. So like the reason why I was super invested in this movie is like everybody I feel has been in times where you are so overcome with like yourself or your emotions where you abandon your ability to perceive reality properly, and you can make an ass of yourself. And it's like, it was super immersive in that way, because you get that moment when Choi walks in the door and you realize, and like he had a perfectly logical explanation for not being there. And like you see the look on Will's face immediately move to tears because he's realizing that his perception of reality is so off. He's so embarrassed. He's hurt these people that he loves. Like there's so many different emotions rattling around him there. Sorry, I was really tied to that moment. So when it became a murder movie, I was kind of like,
And that moment is perfect. There's like all of these emotions that he's digesting that are being thrown at him too. So he's like ashamed and angry, and then there are people that are angry at him, like David, and then they feel like there are people around him as friends who feel like sorry for him and ashamed for him, and it's just like this pot of emotion in that room.
Emotions.
It's just crazy. And then you have Choi in the corner just like, what? Like, what's going on, guys?
Oh my gosh, that is such an awkward, like that moment in that movie made me feel so uncomfortable. I just kept on wanting it to end, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah. And the fact that he like, I don't know if you call it like a cathartic moment or what, like a rock bottom moment. He then immediately comes back and starts like whacking glasses out of people's hands. Like he doubles down again.
Which that made the turn really effective.
Yeah.
I was still super at that point like, oh shit, Will, you're really f***ing up, dude. Like this is not the way you want to go. Oh, and then it turns out he's right. Oh shit.
And they misdirected it from that too. They like went into this like brawl that they're having, and nobody notices that Gina dies until Kira's like, oh, she's not breathing. And they're like, no, she's breathing, as they're talking about
Sadie,
as they're talking about Sadie, and they're like, no, she's breathing, and she's like, no, Gina, and like Gina just dies in a room full of her friends with nobody noticing.
Nobody's watching. Their backs are literally turned to her.
Yes, and she was just trying to have fun.
But I think you were saying this earlier. You're waiting for that moment where Will goes too far. And like he almost kills a woman.
Yeah.
And maybe does. In that moment, you're like, did he just kill that lady? And that's where you start to really feel like you were wrong the whole time. Yes. I think maybe reveling in that moment just like a tad longer would have been great, because
maybe,
You know, that deep, deep shame is something I want to feel.
Well, and then
when I
the
watch
parallels to the parallels to that moment with Sadie where he potentially kills her, and the moment with Pruitt as he's talking about how he killed his wife.
Right.
The parallels are insane. So you're just like, from when Pruitt tells the story about killing his wife, and then that it hit me as soon as like you see Sadie's head hit the thing, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I had such bad feelings about Pruitt, and look, it's happening to Will. It was crazy.
It's definitely one of those movies that makes you scared of head trauma.
Yeah.
Everybody's head is made out of glass. It's just
well, when you hit a hard surface, I mean,
I know, but it's like it keeps happening.
oh my God, the way Pruitt dies, that I said it as we were watching a movie, but that is one of the most harrowing screams I have ever heard. It's like a moan scream from Pruitt when he dies.
So chilling.
Every time it gets me, and I've watched this movie several times. But I guess it's like you're wondering if it was like a just desserts kind of thing, like you get to die the way your wife died. That's true justice. You're like, I don't know about that.
No.
Capital punishment, yeah. You know?
That's how the world should work.
Hey, vengeance is like an entire genre in horror.
Yeah. Pruitt's biblical too, right?
Is it?
Feels biblical.
It is a weird name.
Okay, so right after everything goes to shit and they sequester themselves in that room that feels safe but isn't, because there's a sliding glass door right there. And you're like, everything feels like really insane, like, oh my God, they're monsters. And then Will is like, they're just people, like, we can do this. And it's like very reassuring, but also like it brings you out of this horror moment that's like, yeah, that's right, they're just people. This isn't a supernatural movie. They're just people. And that's almost like satisfying and terrifying at the same time.
It terrifies me so much more. It's so scary. Such a scary thought.
I mean, the reason it's all lethal is literally because everybody's submitted. Because if things had unfolded and people were like cognizant of the fact that they were in a movie and they weren't like legitimately people at a dinner party, like as soon as that happens, like the team lines are drawn and you win by numbers. Like the gun becomes the deciding factor, and the gun doesn't show up for like at least a little bit. Like, but I mean, you know, I don't like, if there wasn't that establishment of a whole dinner party leading up to everything, like it would have been a way less lethal movie. Way more people would have survived because you'd have just been like, well, f- these guys, like
there's more of us than our view, and they're just like attack.
Yeah. And if they had gone that route, actually, then maybe Pruitt could have been even more of like a monster, because he only gets like one scene to be a monster though, and I kind of wanted more of that just because it was fun.
He's huge. I mean, they portray him throughout the whole movie as like this hulking mass of a person, and I mean, he's not. He doesn't like look like he's in shape, but he's big, like bigger than everyone else.
Well, and he like kills his wife by hitting her like once, basically, and yeah, she hits her head, but like one hit, you know.
Yeah, well, and you have to wonder if he's telling the whole truth of that story. I mean,
he wouldn't lie.
To me, the creepiest part is the fact that he told that story, true or not.
Like you have to, you know, we never see it, but you have to think that both David and Eden like looked at him like, no, wrong story. Don't tell this story.
I did see David's face, and it was a definite, like, he like did that thing with his mouth and his eyebrows where he's like,
maybe that was a bad idea, Pruitt.
Everyone's uncomfortable now.
The key is still in the door.
They can get away.
I guess to finish that out, I think we would all like to imagine that if we were at that dinner party, that we would say like adios fairly early on.
I'd be Gina. You
Yeah.
think I'm going to say no to wine being put
I know,
in front of
right?
me? No, I'd be dead. So dead.
I would have been so weird about the key in the door. I was so upset about that just as soon as I saw it. Anytime I walked past the key's not in the door, I would have been so awkward about it. I would have been kicked out of that party so quick.
I think I would. I mean, there was no like deadbolt thing, so maybe you just like unlock the door and like pocket the key. Like, I don't know where the key went, but the door's unlocked, so you know, at least there's that.
I would have been drunk on wine. I wouldn't have even noticed.
I hear they had really good wine.
Yeah.
I mean,
they
unless
used
you
the
were
wrong
Will and you
glasses.
saw the door being locked like that, you might not have even known.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have.
And I mean, bars on windows, I don't think I've ever been in a house with bars on the windows.
Well, and they were bars. But they were beautiful. They looked they looked like a design feature. And it was a pattern that kept repeating itself. I think that it was on the lantern, which, but it kept on repeating itself. And so it just there was a partition on the outside on the upper porch that had the same exact design on it. So they
Good
didn't
call.
look.
I totally missed that.
Yeah, pay attention more.
So dumb.
So yeah,
Tyler nodded, so apparently I'm the only one who missed that.
So
I'll give you that.
So, they were bars, but they weren't. I didn't see them and go, oh, my God, there's bars on the windows. I was like, oh, those look pretty.
Yeah.
It's kind of smart the way they did that because he actually points out, bars on the windows, huh? I totally never would have seen those as bars. Anybody else would not have seen those as bars, but he lived there. So he's like, oh, these are bars on the windows.
Yeah. Once again, Will being the voice of logic and reason, and then the entire movie trying to convince us that he's not, that he's the insane one. And I don't know, I felt like it was done really well.
It really was.
Oh yeah, we never talked about Mercy. I thought, I brought it up and then I forgot that David literally says Mercy 5 minutes into the movie. It's like
I definitely chuckled. I don't know if you guys heard, but
I know. I tilted my head down darn, wrong word choice.
Because I feel like we had such a conversation about Mercy before we watched the movie that the very first thing happening is he has to mercy kill a coyote.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, where'd you get the inspiration for that talking point in the first 2 minutes of the movie?
Well, and I feel like we haven't touched on that at all, how on edge that moment makes you, just getting you prepared. You already know it's a weird moment because of the way that Kira and Will are interacting. You know that something weird is about to happen, but then he has to kill a coyote and brutally with a tire iron.
Yeah.
And how on edge does that make you?
Very.
I
think the reason that I brought it up, even though it does happen right in the very beginning, it's very on the nose, and it was even more so after David said Mercy. I was like, damn it.
Damn it, David.
You biblical name. It's a theme throughout because they believe, they being the cult, David and Eden, maybe Eden, they feel that they're giving mercy to their friends, their dinner guests, because they're living a life of pain. It's like a mercy killing. And so I guess the question I would pose to you, what's the difference between what Will did and what they tried to do in relation to mercy?
For me, I guess the coyote was gonna die. And so, he mercy killed him, but the coyote would have lived the rest of its life in pain, excruciating pain. And I guess...
Well, we're all going to die, right?
I knew you were going to say that.
And we're all living in pain, right?
I knew you were going to say that.
Excruciating pain.
It's so bad. It's
I hurt
so much pain.
everywhere.
I know. We're old now.
You guys are old.
You're not that far behind us.
No, but it is a long time away.
Anyways, but it's momentary and it's physical and it's there's nothing that's gonna keep the coyote from dying within a reasonable time frame and not living in pure agony. Whereas emotional pain is very subjective. You can't put, we all have our own emotional pains, but we can function. We can go outside and we can kind of get not over it, because I honestly don't think we should get all the way over it, but we're able to learn to live with it and learn to make the next day the best possible. And so taking that option away from somebody is not mercy, it's selfish.
Options. I like that. No, that's great. Sorry.
Yeah, that was actually all really pretty succinctly put.
I know what I'm talking about.
No, seriously, that was perfect.
what I honestly saw coming, just because, we talked about Mercy, like we'd been super primed on it, was that I guess not sure, but just I thought it was an interesting dynamic the way he takes the fire poker away from Sadie as she's dying, because it's like that moment there is another prompt for another Mercy killing, and he kind of just leaves her there to die. Which, I mean, it's a lot harder to Mercy kill a human being with a fire poker than it is, an animal with a tire iron. I mean, there's a disconnect that a lot of people would feel, and I think the movie encourages you to feel that way too, because like Kira treats it like such a nothing event when they get to the party, and it's just like, oh yeah, we had a coyote and then he had to kill it with a tool.
With Sadie, he just watched her and her friends kill his friends. Do you think that she deserves a lot of mercy at that moment? Like, even if he's just acting pure out of passion in that moment, it's like, oh yeah, I just literally watched you guys kill like some of the people that are closest to me in the world in the house I lost my son in. So fuck you.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's an active denial of mercy.
But I mean, yeah, that's the really cool thing about mercy. Like, you can see it as a gift. Like, I am giving it to you, but it's not something that you can reject. Like, I reject your mercy. It's like, no, it's done. And in this respect, it's a violent mercy. Like, I am enacting mercy upon you. I'm murdering you. That's terrifying. I mean, I did have one last note that I didn't quite, and Will brings it up. I think it's like, it feels like it's towards the end of the movie, but it's not. It's like halfway through, where he calls Eden out and says, like, you're just forgetting our son. You're just letting him go. Like, he doesn't even matter. It would be interesting to talk about what letting go means. Like, does letting go mean forgetting about things?
Well, that's actually, I've been holding back because I've been wanting to say something about this,
Yeah,
and I
well,
keep
please
forgetting.
do.
So Tyler, you were talking earlier about how both of them are wrong in the way that they were dealing with it, and that there was a third, more healthy option. It's all based on each individual person. Each individual person has their own way of getting over trauma and has their own way of dealing with things. Time is a factor, and 2 years after losing your son is not a long time. So yeah, they're not going to be doing it the most healthy way, but of course both of them are going to have different approaches because they're different people. It doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. I mean, in this case, don't kill your friends. But it doesn't mean that one's right and one's wrong.
I'm going to say don't join a cult regardless of the murder, but that might be a personal stance.
But it felt so right.
Do they give you wine?
How good are their videos?
I don't necessarily think, and so this ties into your question about letting go. What does it mean and does it matter? Like, it just depends on the person. Like, some people, they might have to forget. Like, some people, that might be the only way that they can go on to the next day. Might not be okay, might not do justice to the person that they lost, but it's the only way that they're going to make it through to the next day. Other people, they need to hold that person close to them, and it doesn't make them wrong either. And so it's all just going to be entirely based on what is going to allow that person to live their life in the best way they can going forward, because they have to. Otherwise, they're just, they have to die.
And honestly, like we talked about before, the whole movie takes place in one night. There's every possibility he's actually kind of doing better about it than the movie shows, and he's sitting in he's sitting in like a hot spot of reliving his trauma. We never get to see him outside of that, so it's like.
Well, like, I mean, we keep bringing this up, but like, he and Kira are rock solid, going into that. Good. And then he goes outside and he's like, I don't think you can help me. Like, this is driving me insane. Like, I'm losing my mind. She's like, it's cool. Like, just chill out.
She's so good.
Well, actually, I think she storms off, but
he probably deserved it.
No, usually Will is the best.
No.
Beautiful fuzzy face.
I mean, he does have a fuzzy face and very long, luscious locks. Anyways, enough about how attractive the movie stars are.
Why are they so attractive? It's just not fair.
It's like they were chosen.
It's like they get paid a lot of money and can afford gyms and shit.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Couch Theater. My guests this episode are Cassi Gablick and Tyler Standifird. Artwork by Rupert Lee, or Robot, who you can follow on Instagram at 20th Century Robot. All episodes are written and produced by me, Stefan Cowper, along with a few questionable baselines. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, listen to us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, or Twitter, all under Couch Theater. We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Couch Theater and that you come back next time for another movie and another conversation. Sorry, just wait for that noise to pass. I don't know what that was.
Oh, I thought you were looking for pizza.
Maybe.
Man, if you just find pizza over there, you should not eat it.
Eat it, see what happens. It'd be very exciting.
Surprise pizza.
New podcast.
I found this pizza on the floor.
That's just what it's called.